They danced. I disappeared. No one saw the empty chair at the back, or the woman who paid for every last detail, erased from her own daughter's day. But the receipt folder had my name, and I was done being invisible. I paid for the flowers, I paid for the music, but I wasn't allowed to walk her down the aisle. That honor went to a man who hadn't even memorized her middle name. They say weddings are about love, but when I zipped up my own dress in silence, the fabric felt more like armor than celebration. April had texted me that morning. No, good morning. No, can't wait to see you. Just, that dress draws too much attention. Can you wear something more muted? Muted. Like a mother who funded the venue, but wasn't asked to sit near the head table. Muted, like the way grief tastes, slow, metallic, and hard to swallow. I wore the dress anyway, not out of defiance, but because it was the only one that still fit the version of me that hadn't been erased. At the venue, I was guided to the outermost table, far from the DJ, even farther from the woman I had carried in my womb, and who now walked past me like a reluctant coworker. The place card didn't say Mom. It said E. Walker. Initials like I was being billed, not invited. I tried to smile, tried to pretend the chicken wasn't cold, tried to ignore the glances from her new in-laws, all polite teeth and tighter judgment. When the music started, I stood to take a photo, 1 frame, 1 second, 1 effort to be part of a moment I wasn't allowed to belong to. That's when she hissed it low sharp, like a snakebite dressed in satin. You don't belong here. No context. No whisper of sorry. Just 6 syllables that redefined every birthday party I ever threw, every math test I helped her study for, every fever I sat beside while the rest of the world kept sleeping. Guests looked, then looked away. Of course they did. No one wants to watch a mother get disowned next to a buffet table. I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I suddenly understood everything I'd refused to admit for years. She didn't forget me. She edited me. I stepped outside. The cold air hit like honesty. My heart pounded beneath a dress I was never meant to wear for pride, only to disappear inside. I found a bench near the fountain, the one I paid extra for because she wanted a fairy tale backdrop. It was beautiful, sure, but in the wrong story. I pulled out my phone. No missed calls, no messages, just a single charge notification for the catering invoice finalized yesterday. My name, my card. I looked at the screen a long while, then typed a single line to the venue manager to speak. Urgent. Then I hit send. No smile, no emoji, no explanation. I wasn't leaving. I was preparing. The venue manager replied in under a minute. Of course, there's a private room upstairs. Shall I meet you there? I stood, and for the first time all day, I walked with purpose. She erased me in public, but the contract still had my name, and ink doesn't flinch the way daughters do. I sat in my car, engine off, radio silent, heat bleeding through the windshield like second-hand shame. For a moment, I stared straight ahead, not crying, not blinking, just ... cataloging the song that played when April walked down the aisle, the napkins I chose 3 months ago, the chandelier I upgraded just for photos. Then I reached over, popped open the glove box, and pulled out the folder she forgot I still carried, manila bent at the edges, labeled in my handwriting, agreement plus all confirmations. It felt heavier than paper, because it held the weight of a woman who had been expected to pay and disappear. I flipped it open. Receipts, invoices, emails from the florist about the centerpiece height, my initials next to every approval, and at the very top, the contract, signed, witnessed, billed to me. Evelyn Walker, sole booking authority. She'd asked to plan the wedding herself. Said she wanted creative freedom. I thought it was independence. Now I realize it was a prelude to ERASURE. No dress shopping, no invitation designing, no menu tasting. Just forwarded links and a "will let you know" that echoed louder than any slammed door ever could. I turned to the second page. Clause 8b. All amendments or cancellations are to be approved by the booking client. Client, not mother, not guest. Client. I scrolled through my contacts, found the venue manager Tom, the one who'd sent me holiday cards 2 years in a row after I booked a charity event with him. I hit dial. His voice came on quickly, polite, sharp, like someone trained to solve problems before the bride hears about them. Evelyn, I saw your message. Are you all right? I stared out the windshield again, at a couple posing near the fountain. He looked nervous. She looked certain. I envied her and pitied her, all in one breath. I need to revisit the contract, I said. My voice was steady, like a bridge that knows it might burn. Tom hesitated, then said, "Of course. Just to clarify, you're still listed as the primary." He paused, then added, carefully, "Technically, you still have control." Technically, the kind of word that always hides a door behind it. And I'd just found the key. I looked down at my lap, at the creases in my dress. The one she said was too much. The one that still smelled faintly of lavender and courage. Then, "Let's see what that's worth," I whispered, because I wasn't just Evelyn anymore. I was the woman with the receipt, and the silence she handed me was about to become very, very expensive. As I stepped out of the car, the folder pressed against my side like a heartbeat. Tom texted, "Private suite cleared. I'll meet you in 10. I walked toward the stairs, and the ground didn't feel beneath me. It felt behind me. They danced. I disappeared, and no one noticed the difference. I watched from behind a column near the exit. Her gown twirled like a secret, his arm around her shoulder, grinning like he'd never missed a parent-teacher night in his life. The crowd cheered, but no one clapped for absence. They didn't see the mother of the bride wasn't in the slideshow, didn't hear my name in the speech, didn't remember who signed the checks that kept the chandeliers glowing. I stepped back into the hallway. The bass thumped through the walls like a heartbeat I didn't belong to anymore. I walked past the staff, the catering trays, the buzz of laughter echoing off champagne flutes. Upstairs, the bridal suite sat half open. I pushed it the rest of the way. No one was there, just a room that smelled like blush and hairspray. And a bouquet full, blooming, untouched, still resting on the vanity, left behind. I sat in the dark, let the silence stretch. No music here, no applause, just the kind of quiet that women hold inside their rib cages for years. The bouquet caught the moonlight, white peonies, pale pink roses, hydrangeas, her favorite, once. Flashback, April at 5, sitting cross-legged on the back porch, petals scattered across her lap. "Like this, baby," I told her. "Start from the outside in." She wrinkled her nose. "Why?" "Because that's how you build something that doesn't fall apart." I blinked. The memory dissolved into the present, and the irony hurt more than the insult. A soft knock pulled me back. I turned. A young woman stood in the doorway, worried eyes, uniform, a name tag, Jayla, staff assistant. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Are you okay?" I didn't cry, didn't rage, just smiled. Faint, practiced, like a woman who's used to finishing her own sentences. "I'm fine," I said, then added, quieter, "Just not finished yet." Jayla lingered, but I gave her a nod, a permission slip of dismissal. She backed out, gently closing the door behind her. I reached into my purse, pulled out the contract, opened it under the flicker of the vanity bulb. There it was. Clause 14. Cancellation in case of breach of agreement. Breach. The word tasted like justice, not loud, not cruel, but earned. The sound of laughter drifted up the stairwell. April's voice, airy, bright, easy. The sound of a woman who'd never known the ache of being left out in a room she paid to enter. I picked up the bouquet, held it for a moment, then placed it gently in the trash bin by the vanity. Some arrangements don't deserve to be carried down the aisle. I circled the clause with a pen from my purse, pressed it so hard, the ink bled through. Then I folded the contract once, tucked it beneath my arm, and whispered into the empty room, "Let the reception continue, while I rewrite the ending." They ignored me, she remembered. Sometimes the quietest ones are the ones who keep the receipts. Morning came with that hotel silence, thick, stale, padded in beige. I hadn't slept much, too many thoughts. Too much noise inside a head that had smiled politely through too many erasures. I opened the curtains, let the light hit my face like proof that I still existed. There was a knock. Not from room service. Too hesitant. Too human. I opened the door. Jayla. Same clipboard. Same, cautious kindness. "Just checking on you," she said, eyes scanning me like I might fall over if she blinked too long. I gestured for her to come in. She hesitated, like being invited into a room meant for other people was still new to her, then stepped inside. "I need help," I said, pulling out the folder again. "The vendor contracts, I want to go through them. All of them." Her brows lifted. "Now, especially now." She sat, opened the folder without asking questions. Her fingers moved delicately across the pages. pausing at the catering terms, the DJ fee, the security deposit clause. You know your way around fine print, I said. Jayla shrugged. My grandma used to say, if you don't read the paper they hand you, you'll pay for it twice. I smiled. Smart woman. She raised me. After my mom left. The pause sat there, not uncomfortable, just truthful. She left you behind? I asked gently. Jayla nodded, still looking at the contracts. More like rerouted her life, without me in it. I said nothing for a beat. Then, well, I guess you and I have something in common. She looked up, both cast aside. I said, both underestimated. Jayla blinked, then smiled. Not wide, just real. Would you consider helping me beyond today? I asked. I'm starting something. A trust, for women like us. Women over 50, forgotten by the people they made room for their whole lives. She stared. You'd want me to help you with that? Part-time, remote, flexible, with someone who already knows how to read between the lines. She bit her lip, then said, most people forget, people like me. Not anymore, I replied. That was the thing about being erased. Once it happened to you, you stopped letting it happen to others. We finished the folder, every term, every clause, and then we found it, the 48-hour clause, the one that let me cancel everything legally, financially, without a single sorry. Jayla exhaled. Are you sure you want to go through with this? I stared at the final line, typed in fine gray font like it hoped no one would notice. The booking party reserves the right to cancel under breach with written notice. I looked at my hands. Steady, no shake, no shame. Then I opened my laptop, typed out the email to Tom's subject line, notice of cancellation. Dear Tom, per clause 14 of the agreement, please consider this official notice of breach-triggered cancellation, effective 48 hours from now. Please inform all vendors accordingly. Thank you for your discretion. Sincerely, Evelyn Walker. I hit send. No fanfare, no thunder. Just a quiet liberation, dressed as logistics. Jayla stood. Something tells me this is only the beginning. I walked her to the door, and just before she left, I turned to look at the hotel room one last time, and whispered to myself, next time, I'll choose the guest list. She woke to confetti. I woke to a lawyer. Some celebrations come with glitter, others come with clauses. April's first post went live at 6:13 a.m., a filtered photo of her in the bridal suite, hand lifted, ring sparkling, captioned, perfect day. Grateful for everyone who made it possible, everyone, except the woman who signed every invoice. I stared at it from the cafe corner where I waited. Small table, one coffee, no sugar. The phone screen glowed in my hand. Dozens of comments, hearts, #bride vibes. My name wasn't mentioned again, but that morning, I didn't cry. I had an appointment. Martin arrived 2 minutes early, just like always. Slate blazer, coffee, breath, a briefcase that carried more secrets than sympathy. He sat, looked at me the way only someone who's seen both your divorce and your dignity can. You're serious about this? He asked. I didn't answer with words, just opened the red leather folder and pushed it across the table. He flipped through slowly, eyes scanning pages like a priest reading sin aloud. Receipts, emails, signed agreements, screenshots of texts where April assured me, "You'll be honored, Mom. This wedding is ours." He paused. This matters, he said, tapping a message time-stamped 2 months ago. I nodded. She told me I'd be included, that I'd have a seat beside her. Instead, I got a folding chair near the fire exit. He sighed, deep, the kind of sigh lawyers only give when the emotional is about to become legal. Misrepresentation, breach of promise, intentional exclusion. It's not the cleanest case, but Evelyn, it's something. I pulled out my phone again, showed him the post, the bouquet, the smiling guests, the captions that erased me pixel by pixel. You funded the entire thing, Martin muttered, flipping again. And legally, you still hold the venue lease, catering, media rights. He paused, looked at me carefully. You could pull the plug on everything, lock the photo rights, revoke video usage, even cut the food access for the rest of the week's events. I took a long sip of my coffee, bitter, cold, but strangely comforting. He leaned in. You're sure this isn't revenge? That word again, revenge, the one people use when women stop making themselves small. I set the cup down, looked him square in the eye. It's clarity. There was a silence then, not empty, but full. Full of every moment I stayed quiet. Every time I paid the bill and smiled through the steam. He nodded, slow. Then, I'll draft the letters. We have 48 hours until the breach goes into full effect. He tapped his pen twice, looked at me one last time, like he was asking not legally, but personally, if I was ready. I was. As he left, I opened my phone one more time, scrolled past April's post, past the comments, past the applause, and saved one quiet photo to my gallery, the one Jay took of me last night, alone, holding the contract like a sword, because this time, I wouldn't be edited out. She didn't block me, she didn't thank me, she just vanished. The kind of silence that feels less like distance and more like design. 3 days, not a single call, not even a forwarded meme. The only thing April sent me after the wedding, one line. No punctuation, no warmth. Please don't ruin this. Not, I love you. Not, thank you for everything. Just a request, a warning, a leash. I reread it from my kitchen chair, the same one I bought at a flea market when April was 10. We carried it home together, one wooden leg scraping the sidewalk the whole way. She said it made us sound important. Now, she sounded like a press release. The kind of daughter who sends you silence until your signature is required. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, typed a draft reply. I never planned to send. You wore a gown I paid for and danced in a room I rented. You edited me out, but still expected me not to speak. I stayed silent for 29 years. I'm done whispering. Then, I deleted it because some things don't need to be said twice, especially to people who only hear you when they need something. Jayla came by that afternoon, laptop under her arm, new blouse, same steady eyes. I printed the vendor letters, she said softly, sliding the stack across the table. 13 envelopes, stamped, addressed, final. My hands didn't shake as I signed, not because I wasn't heartbroken, but because heartbreak wasn't new. What was new was choosing myself after it. JAAYLA placed the final copy into the red folder, the one that had held invoices, now holding intent. Want me to drop them at the post office? She asked. No, I said, I'll do it, because some deliveries deserve to pass through the hands of the woman who was once expected to foot the bill and fade. She nodded, stayed quiet. She understood something April never had. Presence isn't noise. It's choosing to stay when there's nothing left to gain. We stood together at the door for a moment. No ceremony, no fanfare, just two women, one young, one no longer willing to be erased, choosing to witness each other. And then, the knock. 3 slow taps. Not urgent, not frantic, just certain. Jayla opened the door, stepped aside, and there he stood, April's husband, tie askew, eyes to calm. Alone. He held something behind his back. I couldn't see what, but I could already feel it wasn't going to be an apology. She filled her wedding with rented smiles. I filled my hallway with the kind of memories that never made it to Instagram, the ones that bled, but stayed. He didn't speak right away. April's husband just stood there, fidgeting with something behind his back, a brown envelope, creased and soft around the corners, like it had been handled too many times but never opened. I thought she'd come herself, I said, flat, not bitter. Just observant. She's resting, he mumbled. I raised a brow. He couldn't look me in the eye. I stepped back. Didn't invite him in. Didn't need to. Pain doesn't need company, just boundaries. He handed me the envelope. Said it had some notes, she wrote, things she meant to say, then turned and left before I could open my mouth. I didn't follow. Didn't read the letter. Not yet. Instead, I turned back inside and stared at the photo wall. 17 frames. Family trips, first days of school, birthdays where I baked, from scratch even when I had the flu. Only 2 photos had both of us, April and me, in the same frame. One from preschool graduation, one from her senior prom. Neither had been taken by her. I took them down, not with rage, with precision, frame by frame. Not to erase her, but to release myself. I placed them on the dining table like evidence. Jayla arrived as I was wrapping the last one in newspaper. She didn't ask. She just grabbed a roll of tape and helped. I kept all the photos that hurt, I said, not looking up. Why? She asked softly. Because I thought they proved something, that if I displayed them long enough, maybe the love would come back. Jayla nodded, and then opened the old cedar box I'd tucked away in the hallway cabinet. It held letters, stacks of them, from April, from old friends, from my mother. She handed me one, yellowed, written in cursive. I knew the handwriting before I unfolded it. Evelyn, the only thing worse than being forgotten is being tolerated. Never confuse the two. It was signed M, my mother, who died 10 years ago, who had her own war stories from family dinners that went quiet when she entered the room. I clutched it for a second too long, felt the burn in my throat. Not tears, not yet, just breath, held too long. Finally released, Jayla knelt beside the cedar box, picked up my phone. It had fallen from the table. She tapped the screen. Evelyn, she said, blinking. What is it? She turned the phone to me. An old voice memo had been opened. One from 3 years ago. April's voice, raw, a little cracked, filled the room. Mom, I'm sorry I've been distant. I know I don't say it, but I see what you do. I don't always know how to let you in without feeling small, but I love you. I always do. I stared at the phone, not moving. The sound of my daughter's voice, younger, more honest, unfiltered. A version of her that felt more like truth than anything I'd seen in months. I didn't press pause. I let it finish, let her say every word, even if she'd forgotten them since. Jayla whispered, "Do you want to keep it?" I didn't answer, but I reached for the frame I hadn't packed and slid the letter from my mother behind the glass. Wanted me quiet, so I gave them contracts. Nothing screams louder than a woman who finally reads the fine print. Martin finished the draft that morning, his signature, as sharp as the final period. He slid it across the table like a closing statement. But I didn't just sign. I added a preface, a single page, titled, Terms of My Love. It wasn't bitter. It was precise. To whom it may concern, this is not revenge. This is restoration. A mother is not a service. A woman is not a transaction. And silence is not consent. Signed, the woman who paid the bill and still ate alone. Jayla printed the full packet on cream paper, thick enough to matter. I handed her the envelope. Take it to the venue yourself. I want it delivered by someone who knows what erasure feels like. She nodded once. Tight lips, eyes fierce, left like a courier for a war that didn't start with bullets, but with bridal blush. By sunset, the first cracks showed. The photographer emailed a cancellation. The cake decorator asked if she should refund the final balance. The DJ called to confirm if the playlist still applies. April's circle began to buzz. Vendors pulling out. The truth had weight now. Legal, financial, emotional. That night, my voicemail blinked. One new message. April's voice, this time, cold. Not cracked. Not raw. Rehearsed. You're ruining everything. This was supposed to be mine. Please stop. I listened twice. Not because I didn't hear her, but because I wanted to feel what I didn't anymore. Regret. No. Just recognition. I deleted the voicemail. Lit a sandalwood candle on the kitchen counter. Let the wax melt slow while the world spun outside. Jayla sat across from me in silence. We didn't speak for 5 minutes. Then she whispered, "This is what peace sounds like." I smiled. It was true. Not joy. Not relief. Just stillness. Earned. Until headlights splashed across the front window. Fast. Sharp. A door slammed. I stood quietly. No fear. Just awareness. April burst through the door without knocking. Eyes wide. Dress wrinkled. Phone clutched in one hand like it could protect her from consequence. "This is all about you," she screamed. Her voice sliced through the room, like it had permission. "You couldn't stand that it wasn't your moment, could you?" I said nothing. Because what do you say to someone who's allergic to your boundaries? April threw the envelope on the floor. "I want it all back," she hissed. And I bent down slowly, picked it up, and said, "Then let's begin with the truth." She screamed and left. I didn't chase, because this time, the echo didn't belong to me. I closed the door behind her without a word, didn't lock it, didn't sigh, just turned the handle slowly, like sealing a box you finally stopped trying to unpack. The envelope she'd thrown still sat on the floor, bent, empty, pointless. I stepped over it, made tea, let the kettle whistle longer than it needed to. Sometimes steam says what your mouth no longer has to. At the kitchen table, I opened my laptop, logged into my email. 20-7 drafts. All to April. None sent. The oldest one, 6 years ago, was just a birthday message I rewrote too many times to send. The newest, dated 4 nights ago. Subject line, "You hurt me." The body, "You hurt me because I trained you to think I'd never leave. I kept showing up, So you assumed I'd never stop. I said yes when I should have said not anymore. That's not love. That's surrender. And I'm finally calling it back. I hovered over the send button, but my finger never moved. Some letters aren't for delivery. They're for release. I closed the tab. Opened a blank document, typed a new title, Inheritance Isn't Love. It wasn't a rant. It was a reckoning. I gave her the best years of my silence. I paid for the wedding she invited me to forget. And I watched as she built a legacy of performance, not partnership. This isn't revenge. This is the receipt, because loving someone should not mean losing yourself to prove it. When I finished, I sat back, exhaled. Jayla padded in barefoot, holding a cup of coffee, and that quiet knowing she always carried. She didn't ask what I was doing. She just read. Then tore off a sticky note, wrote one sentence, post this. I looked at her, looked at the screen, looked at myself, reflected in the laptop glass. Not the mother who paid, not the woman who begged, just someone. BECOMING. I clicked publish. My hands trembled. Not from fear, from truth finding its way out. After too long in a locked room, we sat in silence again. Jayla beside me, the house humming. Somewhere down the street, wind chimes sang like they finally had room to be heard. At 2:06 a.m., my phone lit up. A comment on the post. You just gave me the courage to leave my daughter's wedding, too. And just like that, I wasn't alone anymore. I raised her, but she never really saw me. The woman who did wasn't even in the same room. The call came just after noon. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me this silence wasn't April's. Evelyn. A voice like a hallway from my childhood, distant, carpeted with memory. Claire. I breathed. My sister, the ghost of our shared girlhood, calling now. I saw your post, she said. You wrote every word I swallowed for decades. I pressed the phone tighter against my cheek, as if the closeness might make up for the years. We hadn't spoken in almost 4, not since the Thanksgiving where her son called me too intense, and she didn't correct him. But now, we talked for hours, about Mom, how she used to burn the edges of our ambition just so she could say she warned us, how her compliments always had terms and conditions. She taught us to shrink. Claire said, voice raw. But you, Evelyn, you wrote like you cracked something open. I didn't reply right away, because if I had, I might have sobbed. Jayla brought in tea, set it down without a word, stayed quiet but listening. Claire and I kept talking. We told truths we weren't allowed to say at 13. We remembered the way Mom never attended school plays, but sent checkbooks for the program ads. We laughed, tight, painful laughter, that kind women make when grief and humor sit at the same table. At one point, Claire paused, then asked, do you ever think we parented better than we were parented? I didn't hesitate. No, I think we overcompensated, and still got blamed. Jayla looked up then, met my eyes. You saved her too, she said softly, not specifying who. Didn't need to. That night, I lit a single candle, placed it on the windowsill, not for prayer, for presence, for every woman who mothered out of deficit, not abundance, who showed up even when the door was locked behind them, who stayed and then quietly left when staying became erasure. The next morning, a photo arrived, a printed one, envelope torn at the top, no note inside, just a photo of Claire and me, maybe aged 10 and 12, hair braided, dirt on our knees, matching dresses we both hated. On the back, in her handwriting, we were always worth loving. I held it like scripture, and then the doorbell rang. Jayla answered. Her face dropped. She handed me a letter, certified mail, thick paper, official, sealed. Return address, April Lane Sullivan. I opened it slowly, not out of fear, but readiness. Inside, legal notice, a cease and desist, a formal request to retract vendor cancellations, a claim of emotional duress that I had sabotaged a family event for personal grievance. My name in cold print, like I'd broken a law by refusing to be silent. I stared at the signature, April's married name. No Mom, no Evelyn, just ink and injury. I placed the letter next to the photo Claire had sent, looked at both. One said I was too much, the other said I'd always been enough. I picked up my phone, dialed Martin, not because I was scared, but because I was done absorbing everyone else's damage. Let's begin, I said, and he replied, then we don't blink. She tried to punish me with the same silence I taught her to survive. The irony was surgical. She'd used silence as a sword. and now accused me of drawing blood. I sat across from Martin, in his office, same leather chairs, same ticking clock behind him, but something in me had changed. He tapped the folder twice, then opened it. "It's real," he said, "filed through a private mediator. Civil claim for intentional emotional harm. If she escalates, you'll need to testify." I nodded once. No tears, no outrage, just acknowledgement. Like I'd been preparing for this fight long before she sent the papers. Jayla brought in tea, left hers untouched. Martin spoke again, careful. "Are you ready to be questioned about everything? Even the parts you kept hidden?" I stared at the steam curling from my mug, then whispered. I raised her. Pause. "She just didn't keep me. Double quotes flashback. April 13. Crying in her room after her first real heartbreak. I sat on the edge of the bed, braided her hair while she told me he kissed someone else. "I hate him," she sobbed. "You don't," I said gently. "You just hate being left." She cried into my lap for 47 minutes, I remember, because I counted each minute like a prayer. I didn't know how to stop saying. Not once in my life had she sat with me like that. Back in the present, I folded the notice and placed it in the cedar box. Not out of fear, out of filing. "If I speak," I said to Martin, "it'll be the truth, not the version they expect." He nodded, then left with strategy in one hand, empathy in the other. That night, Jayla updated the ICU Trust site. I'd written a new essay, no names, just legacy. Title, "What We Inherit Without Choosing It," was about motherhood, about obligation disguised as loyalty, about how sometimes survival means letting go of the people who demand your silence as proof of love. She uploaded it. We sat in silence. Again, the house had grown familiar with that rhythm. Quiet wasn't emptiness anymore. It was alignment. Donations doubled overnight. One note read, "My daughter thinks I'm weak because I cry. Your words gave me permission to be strong with tears." Another, "My mother never defended herself. You did it for her." Morning came with light that didn't need explanation. Then the phone rang. Martin. I answered on speaker. "She withdrew the claim." He said. Pause. Double quotes, but not cleanly. I tilted my head. "What does that mean?" "She withdrew through her lawyer. No apology, no explanation, just one note." He read it aloud. "Tell her she got what she wanted." "I'm done," Jayla whispered. "That's not surrender. That's projection." I laughed, softly, not because it was funny, but because it was familiar. I walked over to the cedar box, pulled out the wedding photo. I never hung. Tore it in half, not ragefully, just completely. Then placed the left side in the fireproof safe, and the right into the recycling bin. One side for record, one side for release. At her wedding, I sat in the back. At my reading, she stayed in the car. They clapped before I even stood up, which was kind, but not necessary. Standing ovations don't move me the way silence does, not anymore. The room was full, mostly women, mostly older, mostly wearing expressions that said, "I know that kind of love." The kind that asks you to shrink just a little more. Sat front row, a yellow highlighter sticking out of her bun like a quiet crown. I opened the folder. Pages crisp, margins wide, font, Georgia, size 14. So even the wounds could read it. Title, "The Room They Forgot." I read it aloud, not dramatically, not slow, just truthfully, the way you read a eulogy for a life you've decided not to relive. Halfway through, I looked up. A woman in the third row was crying into a scarf she hadn't even unraveled. Someone else nodded like she'd been waiting decades for this sentence. I was always invited to pay, never to belong. When I finished, the room rose, not like a wave but like a collective exhale. Hands clapped, feet shuffled. Some smiles broke open like dammed rivers. Jayla leaned in, whispering, "There's a black car across the street." I followed her eyes through the glass doors. There, dark windows, engine on, and behind the driver's seat barely visible, April. Head down, eyes hidden, no makeup. She didn't wave. I didn't either. I walked out anyway, crossed the park lot, stood just far enough away to be visible, just close enough to be undeniable. Our eyes met, not like mother and daughter, more like two people waiting for the other to blink. She didn't get out. I didn't ask her to. After a beat, I turned, walked back inside, not because I didn't care, but because guilt isn't the same thing as healing. And I didn't owe her a performance. Back inside, the Q&A had begun. Second mic, fourth row, A woman, maybe my age, maybe younger, asked a question that didn't need clarification. How do you forgive someone who doesn't ask for it? The room went still. No murmurs, no fidgeting, just breath. I stepped up to the podium again, smiled, gently, the kind you give someone handing you scissors to cut your own rope, and said, "You don't. You forgive yourself for waiting." Jayla handed me a printout backstage. It was from the ICU Trust inbox. Subject: "You made me feel seen." Underneath, a photo of a pew, empty, except for one folded scarf, and a single sunflower resting on the seat, for the woman who finally stopped apologizing for showing up. This time, I gave myself the last word. The box came on a Wednesday. No ribbon, no return address, just a note taped to the lid. For Evelyn Walker, from one room to another. It was from the ICU nurse, the one who'd emailed last winter, asking if I'd submit a piece for her compilation project. Stories from the silent rooms. I'd forgotten I'd even said yes. Turns out, I was the opening chapter. Jayla brought it in, careful like it was glass. We sat on the living room rug and unwrapped it together. Thick cream pages, matte finish, the kind of book that doesn't demand to be read, only held. My essay came first, printed across 4 pages, with my name in bold. Still here, A Mother's Inventory. I ran my fingers across the title, not possessively, just to feel the proof. After dinner, I wrote a thank you card. Not flowery, not formal. Just this: "Thank you for reminding me that survival stories aren't selfish, they're sacred." And at the bottom, signed, "Still Standing." Jayla smiled when she sealed it. "Still standing," she whispered. "That's a good signature." And I thought maybe I'd start using it. The next morning, another envelope, handwritten, curved script I hadn't seen in months. April. I held it in both hands like it might vanish if I moved too fast. Didn't open it right away, just ... Let it sit on the table while I poured coffee. Then I sliced it open, slow. 3 lines. "I don't know how to undo it all, but I was wrong. I'm sorry for letting you think you were never enough." I didn't cry, I didn't text, I didn't pick up the phone like the past had suddenly been redeemed. Instead, I folded it gently once, then twice, slid it into the drawer, marked "Truths," right beside the note from my mother. Because some pain gets passed down, and some of us choose to stop the transmission. Jayla came in later with a light blanket over her shoulders. Mercy padded behind her, tails slow, eyes soft. We sat quietly, reading different books, different pages, same chapter of healing. The rain started just after 9. Not a storm, just that kind of rain that sounds like forgiveness at the window. Soft, reluctant, still real. Mercy curled at my feet, rested her head on my ankle. Jayla looked up. "I think she meant it," she said. I nodded once, but it wasn't for me. Jayla tilted her head. I explained. She needed to say it, and I needed to know. I didn't need to reply. The printer pinged in the corner. Jayla checked the screen. Her brow lifted. "You've been nominated," she said. "For what?" She turned the screen toward me. "National Advocate of the Year in Women's Mental Health. ICU Trust submitted my name without telling me. The gala would be in 3 months. Venue, same ballroom. April used." I stood by the window, rain dripping down the glass like punctuation, then said, "Let's see what it looks like when the same room welcomes the right story." And Mercy, without lifting her head, sighed like she understood. They told me I'd feel proud. But pride wasn't what settled in my chest. It was something quieter, more honest, like the sound a house makes when no one's asking it to host pain anymore. The venue looked exactly the same. Same gold trim, same polished floors, same chandeliers she once twirled under while I watched from the shadows. But this time, I wasn't seated at the back. This time, I wasn't seated at all. I stood at the podium, lights warm, room full. Every table filled with women who had spent their lives offering apologies like appetizers, and tonight, not one of us had to shrink to be fed. I adjusted the mic, no trembling, just breath, and began. I didn't come here as someone's mother. I came here as the woman who remembered herself when no one else did. The room leaned in, not out of politeness, but recognition. I told them how silence is not a virtue, it's a survival skill. How we're taught to set the table for everyone else's comfort, and call that love. How some rooms aren't meant to be fought for, just exited. Halfway through, I looked down at Jayla, front row again. Same highlighter in her bun. Same steady presence. She smiled, and it held. I ended with this. I didn't build a family. I built a future. One where women don't have to bleed quietly just to keep their names in someone else's story. And they stood, not all at once, but like dominoes of realization, one after another, rising for something inside themselves. Later, I walked outside. The air was warm, not heavy. My heels came off at the door. Grass met skin, unscripted, unapologetic, the same courtyard where she once posed for her first dance. Photos. Tonight, it held no ghosts. Just light, pouring over me like absolution. I looked up at the sky, open, dark, unbothered, then pulled out my phone. Checked the screen. No missed calls. No texts. No damage control. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to wait for anything. I powered it down, not as defiance, as closure. Back inside, the staff packed up softly. Jayla handed me a take-home bouquet, sunflowers and white peonies, the same ones I once found in April's forgotten vanity bouquet. Full circle, but not for nostalgia, for reclamation. I stepped into the elevator alone, watched the numbers blink in slow, graceful silence, pressed the top floor. Private, suite, no event planner, no daughter, no spotlight, just me and Mercy, waiting upstairs. Before I entered, I turned, looked once more down the hallway, the same one I used to trail her down, watching her veil move like a promise I wasn't allowed to touch. And then, I closed the door. Not with a slam, not even a push, just a turn of the knob, soft, final, like I'd finally learned the difference between being dismissed and deciding to leave. The next morning, the house was quiet. Jayla was already at her laptop, responding to messages from the ICU Trust site. Donations were up again, so were invitations to speak. But that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that the linen chair by the window, the one I used to sit in while wondering who I still was now empty. Not because I no longer needed it, but because I no longer needed to ask the question. I walked barefoot across the threshold, sunlight warming the floors I used to mop with grief, picked up the for sale sign leaning against the porch, and smiled. I didn't just sell a house, I bought my freedom.